Quest.
Yo, what's up, Darth? What's up, man? It's been a long time.
I said, why are you insisting to prove God? Do you want me to falsify your God denialism or change your status of neutrality?
Neutrality.
Okay.
First one.
Okay. Well, that's what we need to discuss right there. So
Yeah. So basically,
agnosticism.
what
All right. Look. If you're going to be rude, I'll just leave. I don't put up
stop
with this
being rude.
nonsense.
I was just answering the question. Sorry.
No, I get invited onto a lot of streams, and I'm not suggesting that you were deliberately trying to be rude, but I experience a lot of bad behavior, and I don't put up with it. I just leave. So even if you disagree with me, you're going to learn a lot, okay? So we're going to discuss the issue of neutrality toward God, okay? And then after that, we can get onto the discussion as to the verification or falsification of God. So agnosticism is a self-identification. It's a self-representation. It does not settle the issue that someone is, in fact, neutral toward the existence of God. Okay, so we have that clear? So agnosticism is a self-identification, usually represented by saying, I don't know. Okay? Right. When we examine agnosticism, it turns out that the agnostics are not formally denying God, but they are informally denying God indirectly. So the refusal to acknowledge the necessity of God when speaking about the world constitutes an indirect, informal denial of God while invoking a self-representation of neutrality. So the self-representation is inconsistent with the actual indirect denial of God. Okay?
This is for a revelatory God, which is the only possible God. Is that right?
No, we're not. We're not even. No, you could conceptualize a non-revelatory God, but so there is anyone who claims they're neutral toward the existence of God is typically uneducated on the matter. So everyone who refuses to acknowledge the necessity of God is either directly or indirectly denying God. So that makes every non-theist an atheist. Okay.
In like the local sense or the global sense?
No, it's global. Local atheism is terminology like positive and negative atheism that is sometimes used by certain philosophical wonks in their own the confines of their own treatises, but it's a ridiculous qualification. Okay, because they're actually operating in principle that neutrality toward God is a viable option. Okay, once you remove the idea,
it is though, isn't it?
Is what?
Neutrality towards God. Like
Well,
I get.
Didn't you hear what I just said?
Right, but I get that you can say like everything you do either refers to or doesn't refer to God, but that's a separate issue on whether you know it or not. Right, there's like a
knowledge.
Okay, claim there.
Okay, so are you aware epistemically that knowledge is a subcategory of belief states?
Yeah.
Okay, so knowledge is just a fine line between belief states. Okay, so we call things knowledge when they pass a line of demarcation, which may be different from individual to individual, but we call something knowledge if it passes a line of demarcation where one has greater warrant and justification for believing in a proposition rather than lesser. So the distinction between knowing and believing is really in most conversations it's trivial, it's unimportant. Okay?
You said it's dependent on justification.
Well, rarely. No, because rarely will people have belief states for which they will not offer some level of warrant or justification. So in philosophy, they might refer to knowledge as JTB, justified true belief. But rarely are you going to find somebody, both at a lay level or a professional level, that says, I believe X is true, but I have no warrant and justification for that. It's very hard to find somebody who does that. Okay? So, even belief states are considered to have or should be considered to have warrant justification. It's just that when in philosophy we want to emphasize justification that passes, in my view, that line of demarcation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so there is no defensible claim of neutrality toward God, although people persist in identifying as neutral toward God. Okay, so local atheism, for those of you who may not be familiar with, versus global atheism. Local atheism is the practice of denying one or more gods, but not universalizing that and say there is no God or gods. But it's kind of ridiculous, because then you're making every theist into an atheist, which is a contradiction in terms.
Well, only a local atheist, though, not a.
Okay.
Only a local atheist, though, not a global one.
No, if I was talking with some philosophical wonk, and I don't mean that insultively, like somebody, an academic, I could acquiesce momentarily, but it's really not good in the dialectic to talk about global versus local, because then what you're saying, every person who believes in a god or gods, right, would be classified as a local atheist. But
You're just saying it's not useful dialectically?
No, it's a contradiction in terms. So a theist is an atheist?
Well, not in. Well, there's an equivocation there. There's a theist is a local atheist in some concern, yeah.
No. Unless somebody wants to do this ill-informed type of this nomenclature. Okay, so A in atheism modifies theos, not ism. Okay, it's the negation of theism.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, that's fine. Can I give you an argument against your view?
Yeah. Can you just give me 30 more seconds?
Yeah.
So to talk about local atheists just simply means you disbelieve in one or more gods. Okay, and that's true. That's true of everybody. It would be insane to say that I believe in gods that would constitute being mutually exclusive. Anyway, go ahead, sir.
Okay. Here's my argument against your view.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk about your agnostic thing. Can I try to steel man you? Is that okay?
Wait a minute. Are you the one who said you're going to refute what I said?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so let me just try to steel man you. You tell me if I got you wrong. You want to say agnosticism, which is the belief that you're undecided about God, who is understood as a necessary entity, is impossible, not from formally, but informally or indirectly, right?
Yeah, agnosticism is the claim of neutrality, but the agnostic is not neutral because he indirectly denies God.
Right, and the reason for that is because the agnostic has to assert that it's possible that God, a necessary being, doesn't exist, right?
No. An agnostic is the agnostic position is to claim to suspend judgment. Okay.
Yeah.
But the agnostic hasn't suspended judgment. The agnostic has made a deliberate choice to reject the non-negotiable necessity of God.
Right, in virtue of the fact that they say it's possible that this necessary God does not exist, right?
No, the agnostic would say, in effect, God is optional. But to say that God is optional is to deny his non-negotiable necessity.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, which is just to say that it's, which is just to say that it's possible that this necessary entity doesn't exist. If you say it's possible that a necessary doesn't exist, you're actually saying it doesn't exist. Same thing, right?
Well, upon analysis, to say God is optional is to deny God, because the very concept of God is his necessity or the ground of being.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. So here's the problem. So the agnostic is merely saying it's epistemically possible God doesn't exist. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, but that's not going to fly. But continue.
Yeah, so to say something is epistemically possible means that P is possibly false or possible for all that I know. Now, the relevant part of God's necessity is not in epistemic. It's not epistemically necessary. That's silly. It's metaphysically necessary. And the agnostic is saying they're agnostic about him being metaphysically necessary or possibly unnecessary. So if you ask, the agnostic, is it possible that God is not necessary metaphysically? They say, I'm agnostic. I don't know.
Okay. Well, the problem with that is you're not cognizant of the fact that epistemology and ontology are reciprocal. They depend upon each other. So if if God is metaphysically necessary, then he would then be necessary for epistemic conditions as well. Because epistemology require does one's theory of knowledge require an ontological framework?
But that's irrelevant to the epistemic modality.
No. It's not irrelevant. Okay, can you have a viable epistemology with no ontological framework?
Of course not. There needs to be ontology for you to have a theory of knowledge.
So you can't just sit there and bifurcate epistemology from ontology. They depend upon each other.
Of course you can, based on what it means. Talk about
you can't. Because
I think you've been debunked, man. You're not giving
you're quite mistaken. Okay, does one's theory of ability to know things derive and depend upon the ontology or the frame of reference?
Yeah, there has to be a truth, like a external fact that allows you to know.
Then you cannot wall them off from each other.
Well, of course you can, because we don't have to know that thing.
How many times do I have to explain this?
Sir, you're crashing out because you're in a hole, man.
No, I'm not. Okay, listen, if you're going to be fucking rude with me and pull that teenage maneuver saying I'm crashing out, then I'm going to stop talking.
But you are crashing out, sir.
Okay, have a nice day. You're done. I'm no longer talking.
You've been debunked.
I don't tolerate. See, this is why I don't come into panels like this.
And I did it while
I have to deal with assholes like you. I don't mind you vigorously disagree with me, but when you're pulling these
it's
teenage
your arch nemesis, Darth. It's
it's you. Let me block this. Make sure. Oh, it's you. I didn't realize it. You're an asshole. Bye. See you later. Yeah, you see, this guy's a pathological liar, and he's deliberate. This is what Tupac does.
Is that same Tupac guy?
Unfortunately for him, okay. Hey, listen, either you remove him or I'm gone.
Oh, get Tupac out of here.
I don't know why we let
pathological liar.
We should probably
wait, Cosmic, you need to kick Tupac. This guy harasses Darth all the time. Get him out of here, please.
Remove him or I'm gone.
Remove him.
Okay, this guy is a pathological.
Thank you, Darth. We removed him. Darth, we removed him. We removed him. You're safe.
Okay, this is why I get really indignant with that asshole.
You're among friends now.
Just let me speak for 60 seconds, okay? He is a supreme asshole. Why? Not because he vigorously opposes my content. It's because he's a pathological liar. He's a contrarian. I have dealt with him extensively on Discord and on Clubhouse, and he is also somebody who engages in stalking behavior of myself as well. And he comes under different screen names. And what he will do is he will just debate lying about things that he believes in. And he's not sincere at all. Okay. Mm-hmm. He is literally an internet troll. Okay.
Your behavior.
That Tupac. I hate that Tupac. I didn't know that was Tupac.
Yeah, Tupac is an absolute. He is a demonic type of an individual.
You're among friends though now, Darth.
Okay. It's good to see you again.
I wanted to ask something. By the way, sorry about that. Sorry about the troll. But I think
I'm grateful that you got rid of him. Thank you. That usually doesn't happen.
No, we're good guys here.
I'm accepting gifts.
I think I've heard you say I've asked you this before. You probably don't remember, but I was asking if there was an argument for the claim that God is the necessary precondition for knowledge, and I think you said it's self-authenticating. Is that the response you would still go for?
Well, that's a part of it. So we would the transcendental argument for God is just not a mere philosophical stipulation. It is undergirded by a revelational model. So when we approach the issue of God, we're either operating in principle that we're in an environment or a model of reality that is revelational of God by God to us, or we're operating in principle that we're in a non-revelational status. So given that foundation, God reveals himself, then from an ontological point of view, from that revelation, God is the single causal necessary precondition. And we know that by virtue, and we could only know it by virtue of God's revelation. Once we look past that, we say God being the single causal ground of being, who is characterized as the sum of all perfections, because he is the sum of all perfections, This is the only ontological foundation by which we could have access to truth, knowledge, reason, intelligibility, because God, being the single causal first principle, has to actualize and sustain that. If that is rejected, one will have to explain how their foundational ontology provides for these capacities. And that's going to be an impossibility.
Yeah, that's an interesting view. And I want to say, like, excuse me from a little slow. You probably know way more about this stuff than me. I guess I'm just curious, like, so if somebody were to ask, like, what's the argument that's necessary for truth, logic, reason, and intelligibility? Would you just say it's self-evident, or what would you say if they were to ask?
No, I would say it's evident first and foremost, as I said, by virtue of God's revelation. But when we look at the ontological characteristics of that revelation,
yeah, I did. I wanted you to see it. 20 minutes of it.
In order to speak intelligibly about our world, the world is going to have to be actualized. And that just doesn't mean first cause. It means in the present as well. It's going to have to be actualized by a single causal principle that controls everything. Because if you don't have a single ultimate actualizer or ground of being, then what you now have is chaos. Because now not any one thing controls everything. And so let's say somebody says that there are two or more foundational principles, each of which are absolute. Well, by definition, none of them would be ultimate, because an ultimate cannot have any peers. So if you have several different so-called absolutes, which you wouldn't be able even to know that they were absolute, then you don't have one thing controlling. And so what one thing might implement, the other might take away. So you need a single causal principle that actualizes the unity and diversity of the world. So a fundamental parameter of existence and intelligibility is the unity and diversity, right? So without unity and diversity, that there are identity states and identity states that are distinct and discrete from other identity states, right? You have to have something that ontologically actualizes that and sustains it. And so when you have a single causal first principle that is the sum of all perfections, the self-revealing God, God then actualizes according to his mind, his purpose, and his plan, and of course his character, the fundamental parameters of unity and diversity. If that revelational environment is rejected, then the rejecter is going to have to account for what actualizes the unity and diversity. And that's the precise question that I gave to Graham Oppie in an AMA, and he couldn't answer it. All he could say is, well, I see books on my shelf. So the smartest atheist in the world, or one of the smartest atheists in the world, couldn't answer that basic question.
Yeah, and I did see your talk with him, and I thought you did way better than him. I mean, out of curiosity, just because, like, I've been listening to you a lot, and I'm sort of getting convinced by what you say, but there's just, like, one thing I struggle with, where it's like, because you say, like, okay, there needs to be, like, an ultimate concrete actualizer for all these identity states. Like, what if, like, theoretically, because, like, I've struggled with this before, what if somebody were to ask, well, what's the argument for that? Like, when I get to that point, I don't know what to tell them. So what would you say?
Well, typically that request is typically a stall, dodge, and delay tactic. But occasionally somebody is being sincere about that, which is fine. So the fundamental parameter of unity and diversity in the world, okay, if it is not actualized by a single causal first principle, how do they account for the realness of unity and diversity? It's very closely related to the one and the many problem in philosophy. What is it that is ultimate? Is it the unity of the world or the diversity of the world? And outside the Christian worldview, that cannot be grounded.
Yeah. So let me, because I've actually tried, because I know, I think I've heard you say this before. So I tried saying, like, okay, well, how do you account for the unity and diversity if you don't believe in this? And the typical response that's given to me, at least, is that's a question, not an argument, right? And they're asking, and they'll tell me, it's an argument. It's an argument put in the form of a question.
Yeah.
Because what we're doing is we're giving a positive propositional representation of the Christian worldview of God being the ultimacy of reality. We're giving a positive representation first, followed by a reductio ad absurdum, the impossibility of the contrary. So when we ask them to give an account of that in the form of a question, we're demonstrating the reductio ad absurdum.
Yeah, so
Because,
is there any way... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just wondering, is there any way I can, like, so I know you're saying it's a question, it's an argument in the form of a question. Is there any way I could just, like, state it as an argument without asking the question, like, directly?
Yeah. The self-revealing God, who is the sum of all perfection, the ground of all being, reveals himself in creation as that which actualizes everything because he is perfect, with the impossibility of its negation.
Yeah, so now here's one curiosity. Like, what if somebody said, well, isn't that just begging the question? When you say he reveals himself, that's assuming that he exists, which is exactly what's under dispute. Well, what would you say to that?
So if one is going to apply the notion of circular, well, first of all, it's not a circular argument. It may entail a kind of circular reasoning, but if you're going to use the so-called circular reasoning fallacy and you universalize it, then you forfeit the ability to make any intelligible predications. Okay, because you're not going to have any single proposition that is self-authoritative. Therefore, you won't be able to have any contingently authoritative propositions. So a lot of, and this isn't directed at you or anyone in the room, but I get a lot of numbskulls out there that go, well, that's circular reasoning. Well, when we're talking about the ultimate frame of reference, right? In order to know the ultimate frame of reference, it has to communicate authoritatively, independent of anything else. Because if it required an extrinsic or some independent source to verify it, then it wouldn't be the ultimate source or authority. So the charge of circular reasoning it's quite lame.
Okay, so basically, like, so in other words, if somebody were to tell me, well, wait, that's just begging the question, basically I should just say, yeah, what's the problem with that? It just is begging.
I would say begging the question only deals with contingent truths.
Yeah. I mean, what, because, like, I guess I'm wondering, you know, what if it's like a person who, like, the person's just like, look, I just want to see the non-circular reason. Would I just say there is none? Is that what I'd have to say?
Well, then if that's your universal criterion, it's game over, life out, and therefore you can't even speak contingently.
But what if he's not even saying, like, and again, I know this is because I'm just sort of trying to recount what people raised to me just so I can figure out how. But, like, what if somebody's not even saying that's like a universal principle? What if he's just asking, do you, in this particular case, do you have a non-circular argument? Would I say no? Like, would you say no?
Well, the question of circularity can be used as a kind of a loaded question. And if you agree that in some sense the revelation of God is speaks on its own authority, in some sense that's circular. But when you grant that it's circular reason, they go, that's a fallacy. And it's just this is just like sophism. Okay.
I mean, blue is just playing the devil's advocate.
Great, yeah.
Oh, I know. I am not impugning him or anyone else in the room. I'm just talking about the sophists that I deal with on a regular basis.
Yeah. Okay, so you
okay, so imagine God says to Adam, you may eat of all the trees in the Garden of Eden, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you may not eat, and in the day thereof you will surely die. And Adam says to him, and this is kind of tongue-in-cheek, well, how is that true? And God says, because I said so, because I'm the creator. Mm-hmm. And Adam goes, well, that's circular reasoning. You see how silly that is?
Oh, okay, I get it. So basically you're saying, yes, it is a circular argument, but that's not a problem.
No, it's not a circular argument. There's a difference between circular reasoning and a circular argument. Okay.
Okay. You're saying it's circular reasoning, but that's not an issue.
Yeah, you could have a chain of reasoning given our epistemic condition that is circular. But a chain of circular reasoning isn't precisely the same thing as a circular argument. A circular argument would have the conclusion in one of the premises, rather than the one of the premises has the conclusion in implication. So I could sit there and say, God would be the necessary precondition for there to be reason, truth, and intelligibility. We have reason and truth and intelligibility, therefore God. So sophists would say, well, that's circular reasoning. No, we're just saying we're reason to be true. God would be a necessary precondition. We have reasoning, or we could state it in the negative, saying without God, there could not be truth, reason, and intelligibility. And then premise 2, we have truth, reason, intelligibility, therefore God. It's not circular.
Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, so basically it's like, okay, so when somebody just says that, what I'm going to say basically is like, yeah, that's circular reasoning, but then so what? And
Okay.
I mean, there is one more thought I had about this, which is that, like, what if there's another person who basically said, okay, the necessary precondition is some non-theistic entity. And then if I were to ask them, okay, well, demonstrate that. They just say, let's say the person just says, it's self-authenticating, or I know it by virtue of that thing existing, or something like that. They give like their own form of circular reasoning. How would I know who's right?
Yeah, what do they call it? It's
well,
like Tang argument or something dumb like that.
Well, Tang would be the transcendental argument for the non-existence of God that was, I think, delivered by Michael Martin, which he was eviscerated by, what was his name? He was a student of Greg Bonson. Can't remember what his name off the top of the head. That's what happens when you get old like me. But Tang has been systematically diced and sliced.
You're not old. You're not old, Doc.
Yeah.
I'm 65.
Oh, okay, you're old.
All your best years are ahead of you.
like-
Because that troll in LARPer Jack Kingstrike was basically raising this to me, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't have a response to him.
He's not only a troll, he's an internet stalker, and he's a pervert. Okay? I don't say that because he's an enemy or opponent. He is. If you listen to him at length, he's a pervert.
But what would you say to the Tang kind of argument?
Yeah, like this, like let's say they use their own like circular reasoning.
Okay, I'm trying to refresh my memory. You'll forgive me, because I do a lot of studying on a regular basis, and sometimes I have trouble remembering some stuff in the past. I'm trying to remember the author. He's still alive, and he's a top student of Greg Bonson, who of course was a student of Van Til. And he wrote a solid refutation. He gave a solid, almost a definitive presentation of the transcendental argument for God. But then he responded to Michael Martin's Tang. What is his name? Oh, it'll come to me.
Was it Michael Butler, Ben? Wait.
Michael Butler, thank you. There you go. Yeah, Michael Butler. If you want
Oh
to
my God,
read
Jim.
a blow-by-blow systematic dissection of Tang by Martin,
Would love a
read
blow-by-blow.
Michael Butler's critique. And by the way, Michael Martin chickened out debating Greg Bonson. They were scheduled to debate, and he backed out because he saw what happened to Gordon Stein.
But what would you say to the person who raises Tang?
Yeah, because I guess like there were,
Okay,
every time
refresh my memory. I mean, because there's so many different things I got to study all the time. Refresh my memory about the Michael Martin's Tang.
Well, I mean, it's not. I'm more familiar with the version people use on this platform. I'm not really familiar with the academic one, but basically what they do, they sort of like mirror what you say. So they say like, X is the necessary precondition for knowledge, intelligibility, everything, except they say X is either some sort of like non-theistic foundation.
Yeah,
or something
they're
like
just
that.
doing a parody of the transcendental argument.
And then when I ask them to demonstrate their premise, when I ask them to like demonstrate that, they just say, "Oh, it was caused. I have the belief infallibly by virtue of this non-theistic."
Yeah, well,
they're
okay. Well, they're lying.
Or if they say the impossibility of the contrary.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
usually
first
when
of
they
all,
ask them to argue for it, they do
how
that.
is
Yeah,
okay?
they would need to demonstrate.
So how is God existing and being the ground of being and the precondition of intelligibility? How is that impossible?
Yeah, but when I ask them how is that impossible, they say it's impossible by virtue of the impossibility of the contrary.
Yeah, look, these are sophists. Who are this is sophistry, just doing a atheistic parody of the Christian worldview. Okay, I've had a number of people
How do I
try
respond
this.
to them, though?
All right, let me give you an example, okay? And you can actually see an example of this on YouTube. Cy-10 Brugengate had a debate, I think, with Matt Dillabloviator. And then afterward, there was a Q&A by...
Isn't that true?
Well,
That's totally true.
That's technically his name. You know?
Well, Cy-10 probably slammed him.
I thought Cy did a pretty good job, but afterwards, Cy was in a Q&A with Greg Hovind with another guest. I can't remember what his name is, but he does atheist streams. And a guy stood up, and I'm trying to remember what was his name. I have it on my computer if anybody wants to see it later. And his name was he said his name was Tyler. Well, when I saw Tyler stand up, I recognized his voice because he had such a distinctive voice, and I used to have regular conversations and debate Tyler on other platforms, especially Pal Talk. And he stood up, and Tyler did exactly what you're describing to Cy-10 Brugengate. That there's this thing out there, and it's not God, and it has made me to causally know that it is the ground of all being.
Oh yeah, I saw this video. Yeah.
Right, yeah, and he calls him. His name is Tyler. He's not a stupid guy. So after I saw the video, I ran into Tyler. I'm trying to remember where I ran into him. I think it was in my close to the last days of going on Pal Talk, and I ran into Tyler, and I said, "So Tyler, good to see you again." Blah blah blah. I said, "So can you refresh my memory? What is your final authority?" Okay, in terms of reasoning. And he said, well, the human mind. And I said, are you solid on that? And he goes, yeah. See, he had no idea that I saw him in the video. Okay? So I was setting him up in the way that I didn't let him know. Well,
in a good way.
Yeah. And so I gave him enough rope to hang himself. And so he insisted that human reason and human reason alone is the final authority as to what is and cannot be.
That's crazy.
And I said, so there's nothing ontologically beyond human beings being the final court of appeal as to what is and cannot be. And he said, no. And then I hit him.
Wait, he said that without laughing?
Well, we weren't taught. We were texting. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I'm repeating it as though we were conversing.
Okay.
So I said him in the text, and I said, "So, Tyler, were you at that conference with Cy-10 Brugengate when he debated Matt Dillahunty? And did you stand up and ask a question?" And he kind of sheepishly in the text says, "Yeah. Why are you bringing this up?" And I said, "Do you remember what you said? That there's this thing out there." That's not God, and it has causally made me to know, and it is the ground of all being. And when he brought that up to Cy-10 Brugengate said, "Folks, this is the deception that they have to resort to. It's just a parody. They're not sincere at all.
It's like mental gymnastics."
Yeah, and I said, by the way, you've just been busted. And he goes, yeah, you caught me. I said, you were lying through your teeth to Cy-10 Brugengate on the public, in front of the public cameras. He goes, yeah.
I hate when people lie through their teeth.
Okay, so let's
clear.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think they're liars and everything, but I guess I'm just kind of wondering, like, let's just say one of them, for whatever reason, was telling the truth. I don't know. I know they all lie.
Excellent.
What they think.
I just want to make sure that I have the best one. So, like,
right.
Because if somebody were to ask me, how do I do, what's the argument for my foundation or whatever, I would just say, oh, the impossibility of the contrary. I would use that kind of circular reasoning. And they're just doing the same thing, but for their conclusion. So then how would I, because they're just doing the same thing as me. So then what would I do at that point?
Well, they're claiming
so that's a great, see, I can tell you guys are on the ball because that was the next point I was going to go to. Let's set aside the liars, which are 99.9%. And let's deal with that tiny little percentage of somebody who is, quote, sincere. Okay, so they're advocating a single causal first principle, a ground of being that attribute set is not that of the triune God. So that entity, that ground of being, would be missing one or more of the essential properties of the God of the Bible. Okay, And that would go for any proposed entity as long as it's characteristically not the triune God. Okay, so do we agree on that?
We do, but they wouldn't.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, then if it had the same attribute set,
It would be the same
as
God,
the God of
just
the
a
Bible,
different
then
name.
we would be talking about the God of the Bible.
Yeah,
So
just
I've
slapping a
actually-
different name on it.
Okay, yeah.
I've got one of
Yeah.
the trolls on this before, so I asked them, okay, but it wouldn't have the attributes of my view. And I say, how could you ground it without those attributes? And then they tell me the impossibility of the contrary. So what would I do?
That's just a rhetorical ploy. So I would ask him, what property is this entity missing that the Christian God possesses? Okay.
Well, kind of like a name and trait style thing.
Well, yeah, it does. And by the way, it wouldn't matter what property or attribute they invoke. And then my next question would be, so your God is not characteristically perfect? So you're telling me that the groundable being is imperfect.
Yeah, this is kind of what we were talking about earlier,
So
right?
what does
Before
he say?
Darth got here, when someone said, "Well, why can't God be a quaternity, right, or whatever?" That's called,
Okay,
instead of
so
a trinity, right?
that's a great question.
Yeah.
Okay,
You would think that instead of a trinity, God would be
unnecessary.
You would think that instead of a trinity, God would be an infinity. You know?
Just about the imperfect thing, because like. So I say,
But we'll get back
to
to the quadrinity after we wrap up the
Let's put a pin in it.
It's just like, because I would ask, how can an imperfect foundation ground logic and intelligibility? And they'll just say by virtue of the impossibility of the contract.
That's just a rhetorical ploy.
Yeah, but what would I say to that at that point? Because
No. Well, you see, the impossibility of the contrary cannot be stated unless you establish first a positive propositional representation of the ground of being.
Wait, Darth, couldn't you just accuse them of saying the same thing over again? Couldn't you just say, like, if you're saying the contrary is impossible, that's just to restate the claim I'm asking you for an argument for?
That is a critique that has been given before, but no, it's not. So the impossibility of the contrary is, how shall I express this?
Because wouldn't it be something like you saying like A because everything that's not A isn't, or something like that? Like,
it's impossible.
It's understandable how somebody can arrive at that critique, but it's incorrect. Okay, because the way they're using it in the form of an appeal to ignorance fallacy. Right? So I'm trying to think of how to express this.
Well, actually, one thing they say is that in modal logic, to say that something is necessary is just equivalent to saying that its contrary is impossible in modal logic. That's one thing they say. What would you say to that?
Well, we're not talking about simply modal logic. We're talking about ontology. Okay?
Oh, this would be beyond what? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. So when we say where did this impossibility of the contrary come from? Okay, at least in modern times, it came from Van Til in the early part to the mid part of the 20th century. So when Van Til says Christianity is true due to the impossibility of the contrary, Van Til was attempting to distill the transcendental argument for Christian theism down to its briefest representation, which does not always convey the robustness of it. So when he says that Christianity is true due to the impossibility of the contrary, he's saying Christianity that refers to the fact of its own positive propositional representation.
Yeah. So
followed by a reductio ad absurdum. So this is the beauty of reductio ad absurdum. The transcendental argument for Christian theism is a classic example of a reductio ad absurdum. In a reductio ad absurdum, you have to make a positive case first.
Right. So
then the impossibility of the negation comes in. They're not making a positive case.
Yeah.
They're just saying Christianity is impossible.
Yeah, they're asking to prove that the impossibility is is
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
So I can explain. I can explain to you ontologically and epistemically why a non-Christian worldview is impossible. Because even if you attempt to posit a single ground of all being that is characteristically not the Christian God, then what you're saying is you have grounds for reason, truth, intelligibility, and rational discussion of actuality from an imperfect source.
What if they're saying here's a question, like what if they're saying that they are making a positive claim with like this parity type of thing, right? They're saying their reason for having this.
Okay, and all I have to do is start asking them questions about the attribute set and how that attribute set compares to the Christian God. And they're always going to shoot themselves in the foot.
Wait, what if they say, out of curiosity, just what if they said, for example, they don't know exactly, or they just know that they're distinct from your attributes, and they know that by virtue of a non-intentional
so
revelation.
So they're talking about a single causal first principle. Is it personal or impersonal?
Usually they say it's impersonal.
Yeah.
Because being a personal being is a great making property. So what I like to fall back on is a kind of Anselm reasoning. God is the greatest conceivable being, of which none greater can be conceived. So if they're going to tell me that they have a competitor to the Christian God, right?
It would kind of be like a step right up.
Right, and I can just start going through the attribute set of the God of the Bible in my head quietly, and just say, okay, is your God eternal?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I shouldn't say God. I should say, is your ultimate
causal principle or whatever?
Yeah. I'll just use ultimate for brevity.
Yeah.
Is your ultimate personal? All right, and right then and there, 99.9% of them are deer in the headlights. Is it personal?
So if they say that it's impersonal, and then of course by virtue of being impersonal, that would be denying a great making property. So
yes, and it would, and how would you how is it that an impersonal entity is revelatory?
But when I ask them, they say by virtue of the impossibility of the contrary.
That's rhetoric.
Yeah,
It's going to be so
frustrating.
But I guess
how can you say something as stupid
no,
as
you
that?
can't. Okay, so what he's saying is that in the hypothetical case that there is an ultimate and it is personal, omniscient, omnipotent, etc. It's the attribute set. And how is that impossible?
Yeah, but like that's the problem I have with this. And by the way, I think I'm on board so far. But the problem I have with this is like I say the same thing, and then when they ask me how it's impossible, I just have to appeal to my own paradigm again. And what if they just do that? How is what impossible? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, for example, like when they will ask me, well, how is it the case that these sort of like transcendentals couldn't exist without theism or something like that? Okay, so they're going to have a double problem. They're going to have an ontological and an epistemological problem simultaneously. Mm-hmm. So if they tell you what the certain attributes are of their ultimate are, they're going to have an adequate epistemology so that they can know these ontological characteristics. They'll ontology. Usually they'll appeal to like non-intentional revelation, like causal revelation is what they'll appeal to. No. Either the entity in question, the ultimate, is personal or not personal. So then what they're saying is that an impersonal thing is revelatory or communicative. That's absurd. Okay, that's absurd. That's patently absurd. How do you have a non-personal? How does something that is non-personal, a non-agent, engage in communication? Yeah, I know what they say. So actually what they'll do is they'll actually try to resist calling it communication. They'll say it's causation. So they'll say it causes you to form a certain belief. And by but they're just okay. And so number one, it's not personal. Okay. Mm-hmm. Is it? And it's impersonal.
So
Exactly.
So then it's not omniscient, because omniscient is a
they'll say it doesn't
faculty of
have
agent.
knowledge. Yeah, because it is.
Oh, okay. Then whatever this thing does, it doesn't know if the actualization communicates its target.
Yeah, so let me tell you what they tell me. They say it's like an impersonal but an infallible mechanism, causal mechanism.
The problem is they're just making up this crap as they go along.
But I know, but
I don't actually believe this.
Yeah, but it's still difficult.
I know they're lying.
If they believe it, they're insane.
I know they're all liars and their hearts are dark and divisive. I know all this is true, but like whenever the point is that like I don't understand how to move forward because they're appealing to their own circular reasoning. So
optically,
you have to understand. You have to understand. You're dealing with individuals that have confirmation bias. Now,
yeah, but how would I respond to that? Like, what would I say if they just
okay? What I would say is then you go down. Look, say, is your source perfect or imperfect?
Well, okay, let's just try to do. They'll say like imperfect.
Okay, then an imperfect source cannot necessarily reveal itself.
Or what if
they'll even say stuff like, "Well, what is perfect?" Right?
Well, when they say
perfect means to, as Anselm said, that God or the ultimacy of reality is the greatest conceivable being, of which none greater can conceive, and has great making properties. Now, perfection is a catch-all term to encompass this attribute set. Okay? So if it's imperfect in one area, well, then how do you know it's not imperfect in other areas?
So you're saying if you don't know like a certain aspect about God or an ultimately powerful being, you might not know everything else might be undermined.
Well, yeah. So it's like this. When people challenge the authority and the self-attestation of the Christian scriptures as being the revelation of God, they'll say, well, look, the Bible was written by fallible men. And so therefore, anything that is produced by fallible men cannot exemplify speaking authoritative. I said, thank you for contradicting yourself. And they're like, what? I said, yeah. Are you a fallible man? Therefore, you cannot speak with authority.
I think they call that hoisted on their own petard.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious,
just slightly, yeah.
Because what they say in response, basically what they'll say is that okay, when we try to point out the obvious logic that if something is imperfect, then it can't sort of infallibly cause beliefs in individuals. They'll say is that is false by virtue of the impossibility of the contrary. And then when I ask them, can you show me that the contrary is impossible? They just say yes by virtue of the impossibility of the contrary. And it keeps going on.
So then right then and there, you know that they're lying sophists.
You're dealing with a scumbag.
You're just dealing with look. I'm very experienced in debating and defending the transcendental argument for God. Yeah. Okay, I'm still in a learning process. I've read most of Van Til's works. I've had extensive practice at this. Even at my ability level, dealing with those kinds of people are difficult because they are fundamentally deceitful.
I agree, but I thought we were just like, let's just say one of them was honest. I know that's like never going to happen, right? But like, let's just say one of them was.
Well, then what we do is we get them talking, and they always end up committing metaphysical harikari.
What if they just keep on appealing to the impossibility of their contrary from their own paradigm?
Okay. So then we have to unpack that rhetoric. You see, when Van Til said the impossibility of the contrary, this was not. First of all, Van Til had a PhD in philosophy from Princeton University. He was brilliant in terms of philosophy and theology. Now, there are certain aspects of theology I don't agree with Van Til. Okay.
Yeah, but you were saying it just distills the transcendental argument into something that people can digest.
So we have here this brilliant philosopher and theologian who his specialization is in apologetics. He's not going to invoke a slogan or a cliche that is not, in fact, substantive. they are taking that extreme truncated representation of the transcendental argument for God, and they're just using it as a rhetorical flourish. When they say the contrary is impossible, what they're then saying is, in a world where God exists as the sum of all perfections, it would be impossible for an omnipotent, omniscient, perfect God to reveal himself. That's insane.
Yeah, but when we say, so when we say it's insane, but if I were to ask them to demonstrate it, so for example, what I'm going to do, at some point, like we just talked about, we're going to have to appeal to circular reasoning from our own paradigm, and they're going to keep say they just keep appealing to circular reasoning from their own paradigm, no matter what they say.
But they can't. Look,
impossible. They say you're presupposing my worldview.
I keep on explaining to you. You keep on asking the same question over and again. What they're just simply doing is they are not sincerely giving you content. They're just continuing to resort to rhetorical flourishes.
As opposed to you who would give more content.
What I'm saying to you is you're going to reach a point where that's all they've got. You see, if somebody asked me, if you were to ask Van Til, the philosopher, how is the impossibility, how is the contrary impossible? Mm-hmm. He would explain to you with specificity how in a world without a single causal absolute, it was the sum of all perfections, being imperfect cannot guarantee any outcome because it's not perfect. So what they're saying is
everything in that argument is wrong by virtue of it violating your worldview, which is necessary.
Okay, well they would have to demonstrate beyond rhetoric that their model of reality is necessary, which they cannot do.
But what if they say that?
All right, let me just finish.
Okay.
So when what they're saying is that which is characteristically the sum of all perfections, it would be impossible for that attribute set to actualize the world and facilitate us the ability to know things, and especially itself. That is beyond anyone who says that is either a liar, which 99.99 are, or they're insane. To say that which would be perfect in all respects could not do something that isn't a violation of their attribute set is insane. If they're perfect, then they are by definition omnipotent, which doesn't mean they can do anything, because even a perfect being cannot do something, but they cannot do things that are violations of its perfections.
Like the evil.
Darth, can I ask you real quick, then they'll come with the response, which is that all of that is wrong because it is in conflict with their necessary paradigm. And then, so would you say it's
so just think about this. Point? So what they're doing is what they're saying is, and if I'm not answering your question, let me know. What they're doing is they're saying ultimate perfection is impossible to exist and facilitate this world, whereas ultimate imperfection does facilitate this world. Do you know what a performative contradiction is?
Like I am not speaking English.
But then, I sometimes try to say that, but then they're committing
a performative contradiction.
But what if they say I'm committing a performative contradiction by denying their worldview?
I think this is where you're licensed to just start yelling at them.
They have. Oh no! Yeah, they haven't established that ultimate imperfection exists and that ultimate imperfection can facilitate anything.
There's also the BD route where you can just hit the block button.
What if they say that? What if they say that when I claim that they haven't established it? What if they say that's a performative contradiction? That's presupposing their own worldview.
Say that. I would just drop them. I would just drop them if they said that.
I would say, I would first ask him this question. In one or two sentences and no more, what is a performative contradiction? And 99% of them are going to be deer in the headlights. They couldn't answer the question. By the way, if you want to read more on that. Okay, then I would say, okay, how is my recapitulating the revelation of God a self-contradiction? Or how does the background information... Let me just finish.
Okay. Yes.
So for everyone else in the room, a performative... And by the way, if you want to read about performative contradictions, there's a wonderful scholarly paper by Adrian Bardome, I believe his name is. And I think the paper is entitled Transcendental Performative Contradictions. Fantastic paper. The performative contradiction is that it's a proposition or a statement, and the proposition can be an aggregate of propositions, but for brevity, we'll just say it's a single proposition. So it's a proposition or a statement that is in some way semantically self-referential, that contradicts or undermines itself.
Like I'm not speaking
the
English,
background
right? Right,
I'm
Darth?
sorry, what?
Like I'm not speaking English?
Yeah, that would be a performative contradiction.
Yeah.
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 You guys see that? Because I said in English that I wasn't speaking English.
Yeah. I'm not speaking English to you right now.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay,
that's good.
but the
I just made that up.
contradiction has an extension.
That was really deep, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so, but I'm not done with. But a performative contradiction also includes that the background framework or metaphysical context undermines, conflicts, or contradicts the grounding of the proposition.
Right.
And so when they say we're committing a performative contradiction, then we have to explain how ultimate perfection as the ground of all being would undermine or contradict the propositions that we're making.
Yeah, so like, what if they were to say, because I've heard this before. I've heard almost every crazy thing. I've heard it before, basically. They'll say like, well, in order to even deny or to question the authenticity of my worldview, since my worldview is necessary for everything, you must presuppose it. And so for that reason, it is a performative contradiction. You're denying what you must necessarily presuppose. So imperfection, fundamental imperfection is behind everything? Yeah, they'll say yes. By virtue of the impossibility of the contract.
Couldn't they also say that what you think is imperfect
okay, well,
is perfect?
So in imperfection,
we can reschedule.
It means it's not absolute. Van Til at times would refer to God by different nomenclature, and one of them is that God is the absolute.
What if they say something can be absolute and imperfect, and then if you ask them, how do you know? They say by virtue of the impossibility of the contract.
It depends on how we're using the word absolute. In a Van Tilian way, referring to God as the absolute is a single word that he's using in his vocabulary to view that God cannot fail to be, he cannot fail to be persist, he has no imperfections. Okay. Now,
wait, Darth, is your victim? Your victim's on the screen.
I'm not looking at my phone right now.
Okay, fine. It's
Graham Hoppy.
It's Malbloviate. It's Malbloviate.
Okay. By the way, in whatever criticism I make in my interaction with Hoppy, it does not mean that I don't recognize that he's a brilliant philosopher. But
but you did cook him though.
I think I asked him. Him answering me, I see books on my shelf, was a I don't want to be mean here. I mean, it was a colossal fail. He didn't address the question.
Yeah.
Okay, nor could he answer the question.
Yeah. So what if they say something imperfect could be absolute, and then of course they're going to appeal to.
Okay. So if your source is imperfect, then how do you know your reasoning is correct?
They're just going to appeal to their own paradigm by virtue of the impossibility. No.
Look, let me give you an analogy. Okay. Suppose you go to the doctor, okay, and you think you have some ailment that you're suffering from, and the doctor says, we have this new high-tech machine. It just came out last year, and it can diagnose whether you are suffering from this illness or not. Doctor draws the blood. He squirts the blood into the machine, and out it spits out the diagnosis like you would get a receipt, going to the grocery store. And he says, "Oh, here it says that it's negative for your disease," and you're like, "Oh, I'm relieved." And then he says, "Oh, but you know what? This machine, has a 12% error rate. Does that mean you're free of the disease?"
Yeah, you could say like run it 20 more times.
What they'll say though is that something can be imperfect but infallible. Mm-hmm. And then if I ask them
that's a contradiction in terms.
But they'll say that is not a contradiction by virtue of
course it is.
paradigm necessarily. And then
then you need to stop talking with these people.
How come you know so much about what they would say?
So you're saying...
How come you know so much about what they would say, Blue?
Yeah, Blue.
I've talked to all of them. Talked to all of them.
So Blue, at first I thought you were being kind of pedantic.
No, what he's saying is he is repeating what these sophists do.
Yeah.
Well, but
it does get asked a lot, and it's kind of annoying.
So would your advice be like at that point you just stop talking to them because
at that point you have to say this is what you will resort to in your rebellion against God's revelation, that you're just resorting to just making up this stuff as you go along, and then they're going to continue to solve this and say, well, that's what my paradigm says. My paradigm says you're making. I mean, at this point you have to stop with these 14-year-olds trapped in 24-year-old bodies.
Yeah.
Okay, so at that point, what you have to say is like at that point, okay,
and let me ask you this. Why is it that academic skeptics never resort to this ever? Why? Because they don't want to look like colossal assholes or fools. Okay.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's good advice.
That makes sense.
So basically, whenever you get to that point where it's just like they're doing this kind of like their own,
you're just then what you want to say is if you're coming from the Christian worldview, then you simply point is that you're dealing with somebody who is committed to being deceptive, and you say, I want to thank you for displaying exactly what God revealed in the Bible, that you are suppressing the truth and unrighteousness.
Let's go.
Okay,
that makes sense. I did have one more question, which is, what if there was like a God who had some additional essential property to your conception? How would you refute that view?
Like aesthetic or something?
That's a good question. What would that attribute be?
But what if they just said it's some unknown additional attribute?
Then you say, thank you for wasting my time.
Wait, but Darth, what if they say this?
Hold on a second. If it's unknown, then it is irrational for them to posit it.
What if they wait 1 second? What if they start like singing at you? How does it feel to lose?
I would just say thank you for confirming the scripture about how you are committed to suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, that you will say anything, no matter how ridiculous, rather than to surrender to the God that you know.
I'm just curious, though, so what if, because, and again, this actually...
Let me explain this to you. You have to understand a little bit about biblical anthropology at this point, okay? So these opponents... they're committed to the fact that they are autonomous, independent thinkers and players on this planet. The only alternative is that God is the autonomous one, and we operate under his auspices, under his plan. And if we're in a world where we operate, where God is the creator and we are his creatures, then we cannot be autonomous, independent operators. Right. So it's either we're creaturely or we're not creaturely. So they are committed, whether they're going to admit it or not. And it's not very difficult to get them to acknowledge that they are operating in principle whenever they speak, that they are autonomous, independent operators.
Yeah.
Now, what is the reason why they refuse to accept a well-presented Trendental argument for God is because then they would necessarily be required to repent of their false belief that they are independent, autonomous thinkers in order to recognize that their capacity to reason and think is a gift of God.
Amen.
Okay, and so this is why. So because they're committed, say, is it your position that your reasoning your cognitive apparatus is a gift of God? Okay, and they're going to say, no, I don't accept that. Say, okay, so your cognitive apparatus operates autonomously and independently from God being the source of perfection. They're going to have to say yes. Okay, say good. So you are committed to your own personal autonomy.
Amen.
But there's no way to justify that even if they resort to an appeal to ultimate imperfection. So I'm an autonomous being. Okay. So in that realm, what we now have is either we have determinism or indeterminism.
One or the other.
If they're going to go that sophist route, they're actually appealing to ultimate determinism. So if you have ultimate determinism or indeterminism, that destroys cognitive reasoning.
Done.
But I guess I'm kind of wondering, like, how do you know all of God's essential properties, I guess? Or how do you know that you're right about all of the essential properties?
First of all, we cannot know exhaustively God, but we can know him analogically to the extent that he chooses to reveal us to. Okay?
So how would you rule out there's some additional essential property that you aren't aware of, that you're mistaken about?
Oh, I think I heard someone make this argument before.
Yeah, that's the argument.
So when you come to perfect being theology, even among experts in the field, and that's in the next volume I'm reading. I can't remember the author's name. It's a Japanese name, but it's a book on perfect being theology. So even among experts in perfect being theology, sometimes there may be a disagreement as to the entire set, from our perspective, of the set of great-making properties.
Right.
But the basic set is not in question. Okay? So people might dispute, is God temporal, is God atemporal? But when it comes to he's eternal,
right,
he's omniscient, omnipotent,
everything,
right?
Yeah, but how? Yeah. Like, suppose, like, okay, there's the essential attributes according to the Christian view, and then somebody has another view where, like, there's like one other essential property, and I guess I'm wondering, how would you rule out that actually there isn't that other essential property?
Okay, that's a good question.
Just a second, Darth, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to suspect that Blue is not playing the devil's advocate. It seems more like he is the devil.
I think he's been hurt.
At least he's being cordial. Okay.
I mean, it's like saying, look, I know my neighbor is 6 feet tall.
Unless this is Tupac, trying to hide his voice,
No.
Okay, so what we fall back on.
Wait, but Darth, I have a question.
Is that God has revealed to us,
Darth,
all of his essential properties that he intends for us to know this side of the grave.
What's your
and we don't have to worry about what we don't know yet about God, because what he has made us to know through his natural and special revelation is sufficient for us to communicate the truth of the Christian worldview, with the impossibility of its rational negation.
What are your views on the whole skeptical theism entails some kind of broader skepticism?
Yeah, that's a kind of position that Angstreich used to pull by saying if God could have morally sufficient reasons for moral or natural evils, then he could have morally sufficient reasons to lie to you. But this is not arguing against the God of the Bible, because the God of the Bible has already communicated that he cannot lie.
Right, but what
when you actually loudly agree,
deceived.
The idea would, like in an argument would be like, humans aren't in a position to judge what reasons God may have for permitting states of affairs. Therefore, for any state of affairs, it's possible that God has a morally sufficient reason for permitting the state of affairs, even if we can't discern that reason. And then the next step would just be a person believing Proposition P is a state of affairs. Right?
Yeah. Well, the issue is very simple. God has revealed to us that he is perfect. Therefore, God cannot himself actively exude falsehood.
Yeah, but what if one of the reasons
if you would listen carefully,
and
this is a point that I learned from Van Til, which was very insightful. It's simple, but I overlooked it until I read it. everything that God creates, that he purposes, that comes into contact with our consciousness, including our own self-reflection of our own self-consciousness, is a revelation of God. So if you're going to be operating in principle that God is perfect or he's not perfect. If God is imperfect, then the revelation would fall under the category of imperfection as well.
Yeah, but
therefore,
if you agree with those,
let me just finish. If you're not operating under the auspices of the ground of being that's perfect, then your reasoning faculties means that you have no guarantee that your reasoning is correct and intelligible.
Right.
Only
Can God
under the
send deceiving spirits?
Well, that's a good question. That is a temporal judgment that God has implemented, that other beings are deceiving, and God is withdrawing his protective grace and allowing the vacuum that is there to be filled by evil agents as a punishment to those who have rejected God's revelation. So in 2 Thessalonians, in the end times, with the rise of the Antichrist who will be possessed by Satan, it says God will send a damning delusion to those who accept the lie, who receive not a love of the truth. So the damning delusion, God withholds some of his common grace, which keeps back Satan from, it prevents an even greater magnitude of satanic deception. God withholds his common grace. Satan fills that vacuum with the damning delusion. But the delusion that God, when it says God sends, the question is, by what means does God send the delusion? Does God himself actively deceive, or is simply God stepping back from his common grace? Right. And so it's important to understand the sequence there, because it says damning delusion upon those who believe the lie, who receive not love the truth. The lie is a very specific term in the Bible. It's referred to in Romans 1. Paul talks about believing the lie. And the lie is believing any model of reality wherein we are not under the auspices of a perfect God who reveals himself in creation, and he reveals himself sovereignly to various individuals, prophets throughout human history.
But Darth, the thing I was asking.
Let me just finish, with this verse, because it's important to understand.
We're getting a little tangential. I just want to.
Okay, I'll wrap it up in 30 seconds.
You got it.
So when the order is reversed here, so when somebody does not receive a love of the truth, that is, they're rejecting certain aspects of God's natural and special revelation, as a consequence of not receiving the love of the truth, which is God's revelation, they adopt the lie. Once they adopt the lie, they are now open territory for the damning delusion. Okay, so God is not guilty of deception there.
Okay, but of these three considerations, right, that I do you deny any of these three things? Like the first one is, according to skeptical theism, humans aren't in a position to judge what reasons God has for allowing states of affairs, right? That's the first one.
Why God judges.
The second one.
Well, do you want me to answer one by one, or wait till you get done with all three?
Go ahead.
Okay, we're not in a position to doubt or negate what God has revealed.
Okay, and then the second one, for any state of affairs, let's just say S, it's possible that God has a morally sufficient reason for permitting that state of affairs, even if we can't discern that reason.
The stepping away.
I would simply say it's clear from the biblical revelation that God is going to allow a certain measure of moral and natural evils according to his plan in order to bring about the best of all possible worlds.
And even if we can't discern the reason for that plan, it's still his plan.
Yeah, it's his plan, and his plan is all wise, and we are not in a position to negate it.
That's great. And then the third one is just a person believing Proposition P is a state of affairs. You don't disagree with that, right?
Well, yeah. What's the point of what's the point of the last point?
Well, just if you agree with those things, then this is the conclusion. Therefore, for any proposition P, it's possible that God has a morally sufficient reason for permitting a person to believe P, even if it is false.
Yeah, God has morally sufficient reason.
God would never do that.
Yeah, but I'm just saying whether God would do it or not.
He would.
God has morally sufficient reasons.
The host said something confused. Whether God would do it or not isn't kind of. I'm saying that based on what we're committed to here, it logically follows.
No, God has morally sufficient reasons to allow certain people to believe things that are false, and when He allows that, these are temporal judgments. So God has a set of propositions within the Christian worldview framework that He purposes and doesn't fail to bring to pass that we come to know.
Right.
Whether we retain that or not, or affix a certain amount of confidence in that, is besides the point. So what God intends for us to know, we will know.
Right.
That does not mean, let me just finish.
Okay.
That does not mean that what God intends for us to let me just rephrase this. So what God intends for us to know, we will know. But that does not preclude that once a person is the recipient of God's revelation, that God would prohibit them from believing that which is false. God allows people to believe that which is false as a temporal judgment by virtue of rejecting. So let's go back to the Garden of Eden as a paradigm.
Right.
God gives His revelation. I'm God. I've made you here. I've made all these trees here for you. He gives additional revelation. Do not eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the day thereof you shall surely die. Okay? When Adam and Eve decided to rebel, although Paul impugns Eve as the one who was deceived,
right.
Adam was deceived in an extent, but not to the same extent that Eve was by the serpent.
Right.
So Adam, upon rejecting the love of the truth, which was the revelation of God, he succumbed to a false belief that when he eats it, he will know good and evil and be like God. Okay? And so Adam himself became deceived after rejecting what God had already made him to know.
Right. And that's just kind of, okay, so we're in agreement so far. Okay, so then, I mean, the argument goes on to say, as long as we've established, like, that conclusion, okay, then, here's the first one, and we can do this one by one as well. If, for any proposition P, God may
Come on, that's fair. You guys are making fun of Graham Oppie. I mean, doing that distortion of his head.
No, it's just to house his big name.
No, I'm not distorting anything.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not what it's not, come on.
Well, I think it's just the camera angle. But
no.
The next one, Darth, is if, for any proposition P, God may have a morally sufficient reason for permitting someone to believe P, then our inability to identify such a reason provides no evidence that God would not permit us to hold false beliefs.
He just dropped out.
I think somebody was trying to fix the background noise, but it's not me. I'll just read it again. If, for any proposition P, God may have morally sufficient reason for permitting someone to believe P, then our inability to identify such a reason provides no evidence that God would not permit us to hold false beliefs.
Yeah, this is just reasoning outside of the Christian framework. So you should formulate it that God has sufficient reasons to temporarily judge people who reject His revelation to believe what they ought not.
Mm-hmm. Right,
okay.
Like permissive will versus like Him allowing.
Right, and so what you need to understand, and this isn't a criticism of you, the Philbros out there, the skeptics and the atheist Philbros out there, 99.999% of them are not acquainted with theology.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
They may have read a little bit, but they're not acquainted. Due to their ignorance of more sophisticated explications of biblical theology, they make numerous elementary mistakes in their reasoning about God. So, for example, here's one that the higher level Hillbros tried on me. Well, is there going to be sin in heaven after Judgment Day? And the answer is no.
Yeah, but that's
say, well, then if there's not.
Do you consider Tupac to be a Philbro?
No, he's a troll.
He's a troll.
He's not very smart, because if he would, he wouldn't be resorting to all of these adolescent antics.
Right. It's like, if you're so smart, go be a doctor or something. It's like,
no, if you're really that smart, you can discursively walk through somebody and show how their reasoning is false, instead of constantly pathologically lying and resorting to contrary tactics where you're just a contrarian. Okay, somebody who does that behavior consistently, they're demonstrating their own lack of confidence in their intellectual capabilities.
Okay, well then, Darth, by your reformulation, then this next conclusion would just follow then. So, therefore, our inability to identify a divine reason for our holding false beliefs provides no evidence that God would not permit us to hold false beliefs, right? Because by his
you're not looking at it from the Christian perspective. They're forming the syllogism, and it's not an accurate representation of the Christian model. So the Philbro, I'm not accusing it, because you're not representing it from the Christian framework.
Well, I'm saying, what about the Christian framework, and am I getting wrong?
Because God has his own perfect, morally sufficient reasons to temporally judge people. And anything that somebody is deceived about is a temporal judgment.
I know that. We hashed that out in premise 3 and 4. You agreed that a person believing Proposition P is a state of affairs. You said that's trivially true.
Okay. Yeah. Wrap this up here.
Okay. Well, then there would only be 3 more premises and 1 conclusion. Okay. So,
well, if I'm going to answer the whole thing, I'd want to look this very carefully and go through the very fine tune. The bottom line is this: if we're operating, either we're going to predicate, and that includes form syllogism. Will you either do so with an accurate representation and framework of the Christian worldview or not?
Yeah, but
I'm trying to give you an example. Before I was interrupted, I want to show you how sometimes these syllogisms are framed in not an accurate representation of the Christian worldview. So they'll say something like this: well, if there's not going to be any sin in heaven, God could have created a world where there wasn't sin in the first place. And because they don't know theology, because you see, in the doctrine of salvation,
right,
God first creates a world of agents who can rebel against him.
Yes.
Once they rebel, God initiates the plan of redemption.
Right.
So that when Christ dies on the cross, God grants us a new nature. Okay, and this is a theological doctrine within biblical theology. When we're born again, God gives us a new nature that resides within our soulish experience, along with our physical existence. When we die, our physical body dies, and we are then when we're unalived, we are then freed from that old nature, and we will live on as an agent who can make choices. But when we're born again, we are in essence asking God not only to free us from the penalty of sin, but the presence of sin, which is a disposition, which is a nature. So upon salvation, we are granted a new nature that will live on, and we will forever be free from sin. But because the Philbros aren't looking at this from a biblical theological perspective, they make in errors. The same is true when we talk about God having reasons to allow people. Okay, and
wait,
typically,
can I ask a question? I just want to clarify. I assume like all of this stuff that you said so far is something that you know.
Are you a Christian?
No.
Okay, so then the point is this: if in the Christian worldview, hold on a second. No, stop, because I'm going to forget.
Okay.
Hold the clarifying question.
Okay.
If in the Christian worldview, it is irrational to call anything God says or does into question. It's utterly irrational,
right,
because you have no basis to do so.
Right,
so
and that's
if you're forming, if you're formulating a syllogism, okay, if you're forming a syllogism of reasoning, and you're critiquing the God of the Bible, you're either going to critique him as he really is, or you're treating God, you're critiquing him syllogistically as a hypothetical.
Right, and that's something you know, right?
Right. No, but the point is.
But that's something you know.
What do I know?
Like all these things that you've clarified about the position, that's something that you know to be true about Christianity.
Yes.
Okay.
Now,
but you already agreed.
Sir,
wait,
listen, slow down. See, this is what I don't like about people who machine gun talk.
Okay. You clarified earlier that knowledge is a subset of belief, and you agreed that a person believing Proposition P is the state of affairs.
Yes.
So if the things that you're telling me are things that you know about Christianity, then it just follows that it's a proposition that you believe about Christianity. And we've already covered that in premise 1 through 5 of the argument.
Is there? Wait a minute, dude. I'm really getting a little bit irritated. What is your point here?
Yeah, I only have 3 more premises and then I'm done. You want to go one by one?
Okay, do me a favor. Send me all of these, and I'll go over them with a fine-tooth comb. Now, here's the problem.
Can I just finish the argument real quick for the audience?
Hold on a second. Are you reasoning to me? In which model of reality are you reasoning to me from?
Yeah, I'll get to that right after I finish this argument. Okay.
No, you're going to tell me right now. We're going to stop talking.
By the same skeptical principle.
Okay.
Zach, are you trying to say?
Are you reasoning? You see. All of your listen carefully. Your entire syllogism is a performative contradiction.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
Okay. So the point is, I don't need to get into the nitty-gritty.
Do you know that?
Dude, I'm going to stop talking with you real fast. Are you formulating syllogisms and discursive reasoning to me from a non-Christian model?
Yes.
Okay. Well, here's the problem.
Contradiction.
That's a performative contradiction because listen to me. You're committing a performative contradiction because you don't have an ultimate frame of reference for reason.
Oh, is
What's
that
your
something
ultimate?
You know?
What is your? Okay, hey, dude, I've been doing this for 16 years.
How many?
Don't try this Philbro crap with me like the way teenagers do. Now, you are reasoning to me.
Yeah.
Okay, implicitly in the questions and assertions that you're making to me.
Mm-hmm.
Is that within the framework of your non-Christian worldview?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what's the ultimate context that will provide for your capacity to appropriate or actualize reason and logic?
He doesn't know.
Do I need one?
He doesn't.
Yes.
Oh, is that something you know?
All right, dude.
Okay.
Are you thick? Are you? How old are you?
I'm dummy thick.
No. How old are you?
Huh?
Yeah, he's behaving like a child.
I'm asking you sincerely for my benefit. I like to know the age bracket that I'm dealing with. Yeah, how old are you?
I was born 2,000-year-old yesterday. That's how old I am.
Okay. I'm going to give you a technical response that was in the archives of Cornelius Van Til to respond to you. Okay. Stop fucking interrupting me.
Okay.
So, right, I'm going to give you. You know what? I'll just leave it. We're going to keep on.
No.
Because I
right, I'm going to give you. Hey, right.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a rather strident, brief response, and I discovered this in the archives of Cornelius Van Til in dealing with people like you. The technical response is "fuck you." You're being an asshole, okay? Now, I'm done with you because you're being a sophist. You have now been exposed as a fake, a phony, and a fraud, which is the 3F syndrome, tongue in cheek. Okay?
Yeah,
because now you're claiming that you are reasoning to me and critiquing something, okay, from a frame of reference that doesn't provide for it.
And you know that it doesn't provide for it, right?
Yes, I do know that.
Oh, so that's something you know.
Okay,
and you already agreed that a person believing in Proposition P is a state of affairs, right?
I'm done talking. You're wasting your time talking to me because you're such an asshole.
That's a state of affairs.
You're such an asshole. You don't stop talking. Okay, yeah, fuck off. You know what? Get rid of this guy. Get rid of this guy or I'm leaving. You know what? I'm blocking.
No.
You know what? I think you should block him too. This is appropriate. Yeah, I'm blocking you. Yeah, you're just an asshole.
I sacrificed the body for the bit.
Yeah, everybody just
That's a W though. Darth conceded on every premise.
This is what we're talking about. That people will simply resort to assholery. The guy has a master's degree in assholery, while pretending with semantics to camouflage his assholery in the form that he's being logical and reasonable. You see, all I had to do was ask him one question, and he went into a full blown asshole on steroids. Okay. You know, are you reasoning to?
He realized that he doesn't have any foundation.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I had wanted to ask him if he was asking, was he saying that like God could have morally sufficient reasons to allow for his
don't you understand? Don't you understand?
To be misinterpreted.
They're doing mental gymnastics. These Phil bros, and he was a Phil bro, and he's an absolute asshole. Okay. Because if they don't play this game, they get destroyed. And all I had to do was ask them a simple question. Is your reasoning, logic, and syllogism to me within the framework of your model of reality? He said yes. I said, good, okay. What ultimately is your ontological referent that grants logic and reason? And you see, he was a deer in the headlights. So all he could do was resort to being an asshole.
I think I've seen him hang out with that Tupac guy too.
Yeah, he was just doing a light version of Tupac.
Are they like in the same Discord or something?
Yeah. Yeah, and you see, they don't pull this kind of stuff in real life because real men in real life situations, a certain number of men would just clock you, and then you'd have to go get a partial.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't say that to your face.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. It just and if you can even sound the sound of his voice, he doesn't even sound old enough to shave. You know, so.
Probably doesn't shave.
Yeah.
So I was this is a totally like random thought that occurred to me while you were talking when you said when you brought up the Antichrist, and I swear I've seen a lot more Christians now talking about Trump being the Antichrist, and that just seems like where are they getting this nonsense?
It's Looney Tunes. If you there are different eschatological views. And so if people believe in a literal Antichrist, that would fall within the scope of premillennialism, okay? Because the Antichrist is not going to be a literal person within amillennialism, postmillennialism, or in preterism. So the Antichrist, the beast in the book of Revelation, is going to be a head of state in a 10-nation federation, which... experts in eschatology refer to as the revived Roman Empire. And that's going to be somewhere within the realm of Western Europe. Okay? So
like the EU or something.
Yeah, it could be the EU or an extension of the EU. It'll be just a 10-nation federation. And my guess is that there's going to be some type of unification in Western Europe. Could be the EU. It could be a modification of an extension, whatever. And then it's going to be extended to the world. It'll be like the United States of the world. Okay, because
like through like a one world government.
Yeah, there'll be a one world government, but each state will still be just like you have individual state. You have individual states within the union. Right. There's going to be a worldwide union with separate countries, but they're all in that union. You know, kind of like a Star Trek Federation. Yeah. And so the head of state will then ascend to that one world government. Okay, and he's going to be a man of peace, a man of solution. He's going to fool everybody except a small number of people who become Christians at that time. I hold to a pre-tribulational rapture before the 7-year period and the rise of the Antichrist. But this idea that Trump is the Antichrist is just ridiculous.
Do you think that we'll ever see that, like, in our lifetime?
Well, Darth won't.
We could, but given that I'm 65 and probably a lot older than you, in terms of probabilities, you're more likely to see it than me. Okay?
That's fair.
So, yeah. Oh, can you please remove that? You know, I've been to the zoo last week and I already saw the monkeys. You know, that's another moron.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've dealt with him extensively. He's another pathological liar.
What do you think about people who point to like the rise of AI as like?
I certainly think that I think that AI can certainly take a part within the one world government, because when you have when it talks about the mark of the beast, we can understand the mark of the beast literally or figuratively. It makes no difference.
Right.
Okay. That you have to acquiesce to either the mark or whatever. Right. Yeah. Okay. In order to buy or sell. Mm-hmm. So remember, after, I don't know how old you guys are. Any of you have vivid memories of 9/11? If you're old enough.
Yeah.
The standards for security and identification skyrocketed from before 9/11.
Do you remember when you could be like 15 minutes before your plane flight and get to the airport?
Oh yeah, even when there was hijackings, like in the 60s when I was a kid. Even after that event, you know, there weren't. I don't even remember that there were bombings of airplanes. But once these major terroristic, see, this is why people will give up their rights or certain security for peace. So all it's going to take is one major terrorist action to form a one world union. So we're headed toward a one world monetary system, and that's going to be facilitated in all likelihood because of our advanced computers and AI. All right. Uh-huh. So that's why the United States was formed, in part, was to have a common bond, a common union, and to have a common monetary system in order to facilitate increasing prosperity and instead of people having different. That's why the European Union instituted the euro. So we're going to see that come to fruition in the world. That'll be some type of one world monetary unit. But then you're going to have a governing body over that, right? Now, I'm not saying that that's going to be the one world government, but it could easily facilitate that. You know, and then we have Israel back in its homeland. It's surrounded by unbelievable millions of Muslims that want to wipe them off the face of this earth.
Yeah,
you know, and that problem. Okay, so even with the vanquishing temporarily of Hamas and Hezbollah, and the significant destruction of Iran, this has not done away with the Islamic threat to Israel's survival. And from a premillennial perspective, what triggers Jesus' return is that there will be military forces that will join together, poised to invade Israel, right? And that's what's going to trigger Jesus' return. Okay? Because the Bible teaches he will save Israel. It's going to save Israel from destruction.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever imagine what that would look like?
Well, we see precursors to that, like, for example, in the 6 Days War or the Yom Kippur War, where there were three surrounding nations. You had Egypt, Jordan, and Syria that sought to wipe Israel out. Mm-hmm. The next time around, more significantly, is going to be a multi-nation group that's much larger. Okay? The hatred of the Jewish state and Jews is systemic and ingrained in Islam. This is not merely an ethnic hatred. It's systemic because this is what the Quran teaches. Yeah. The Quran teaches this. And so unless somebody repents of the false religion of Islam, it's difficult for your average Muslim to jettison this. Now, there are certain instances where we have, like, for example, the son of the founder or leader of Hamas. I don't know that he became a Christian, but he repented of all this hatred
or something. What do they call him?
I don't know his name is, but when you see him on TV, he devastates all these people. But hopefully, maybe he's on his way to becoming a Christian. But what I'm saying is, for your average Muslim, and this is true of people throughout human history, people in Acts 17 it says God places every person in their time and place of birth.